This week on the MotoMan podcast, we bring you a classic deep dive with Formula Drift champion Vaughn Gittin Jr. Not just about cars or competition, rather a blueprint of how a kid from Maryland built a global commercial empire on a concept generally not associated with business.
I quit my job in 07, my computer nerd job, chased the dream, and then 2012, transitioned from just being a driver to team owner and driver, obviously.
We revisit the moment Vaughn transitioned from a guy behind the wheel to a guy signing the paychecks and the immense risk that came with it.
But the big thing was like, okay, now I'm responsible for everyone's livelihood.
Salary, healthcare.
Finding the right people.
He explains how he disrupted the off-road establishment through the use of a rather unusual business strategy.
It's been like a straight up out of a book, The Law of Attraction, that the right people have literally found us.
This is the classic American success story, one with the original fun haver. Vaughn Gittin Jr.
Yes, sir.
Before you and I get too far down the road into today's episode, I want to share a little bit behind the scenes about what you're going to see. You've now experienced 10 of our reimagined MotoMan podcast episodes, which have all been shot with our new state-of-the-art Sony Cinema Line gear. However, before we acquired that gear, we did shoot 10 episodes of the podcast with the old gear. We're calling those the Vault episodes. What does that mean for you today? The picture quality, it may not be to the level to which you've become accustomed. However, the audio, the post-production, and absolutely the storytelling is all the same. So while you watch this discussion between me and an amazing guest, I will continue on the top end of this, a bicycle with a Volkswagen motor strapped to it. When I set this up, I actually went back and looked at the date at our original Inside the MotoMan studio, and I thought it was maybe 5 years ago. But then it was about that time that I believe you switched to Nitto tire. And then you were married like 2 years at that point. So there's no children at that point in your life.
Yeah, no, it all happened around the same time.
Yeah, and you switched your business. You used to be a guy that was a racer on somebody else's team.
Yep.
And that was the beginning when you became your own team.
Yep,
So
correct.
today, I want to pick up, where has the business gone since 2014?
Yeah. Yeah, wow, that's cool. This will be a fun combo. So 2012 was the last year that I drove for a team. And then 2013 I broke out and went on my own. And that's when we partnered with Nitto, started our own team. And that was another like big step for me. I look at like my steps in my career, and it was like I quit my job in 07.
IT.
Yeah, my computer nerd job, chased the dream, and then 2012, transitioned from just being a driver to team owner and driver, obviously.
So that's a huge juncture that, if we're honest, not many people go through. A lot of guys can be successful competing in a vehicle, can be competing in other sports, but there's very few people that go to being the team owner. What are like three aspects that are involved in making that switch?
Well, the first one is covering the bills.
You've always been very direct. I love it about you.
I think for me, that was a big one. We had previously I never had to worry about anything, and anything I did extra was extra. Like there was no real overhead. So that's the one big one, and the big risk is covering the bills. The other big challenge at that point is people.
That's finding them, paying them, what?
Yeah, it's more about like finding the right people. I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I have been for a long time. And so, it's not like walking into this like 9 to 5. That's the same thing every day. You need to find the right people with the right personalities that are along for the ride that, trust you and what you're doing and believe in you, and then they bring their all. And so that was something early on that I learned that I hadn't learned because I hadn't been running a team was, how important it is to have the right people. And I've been very lucky with that.
And like, what roles were the most critical in making this switch?
Well, the really good news was that the team that was running the cars, um, they came with me. They were kind of ready to move on, and when that decision was made, um, they came along with me for the most part. And the engineer who is now, really, still works with me, Ian, who was running effectively a lot of the team at that time, he came over with me. And so there wasn't too much on the team, like the actual operation of the vehicles that changed because the team came. But the big thing was like, okay, now I'm responsible for everyone's livelihood,
Salary, healthcare,
all of it.
families.
Yeah. And so, yeah. And at that time, it was probably only, 6 employees. There's 60 now. Um, but stepping back to your question, so people, right, paying the bills, finding the right people, juggling it all. For me personally, I was still living in Maryland. So
You make the switch. So most of the audience doesn't know this. We're sitting in Charlotte, North Carolina. You were basically in NASCAR country.
yeah,
Your neighbor is the Charlotte Motor Speedway.
yeah, you can literally hear it. Yeah.
What was the impetus to move here?
So I was, running my business on an island for, 8 years. Um, and so
It's the island, not Detroit, and not race car country.
yeah, in Maryland,
You're in Maryland.
just north of Baltimore.
Yeah.
And I was there because that's where I was born and raised, and my family was there, and my wife was from there, and it worked well because I was traveling so much. I would just meet the team at places, and it worked very well. This is also the very early days of RTR. A lot of people just know me as, professional drifter. We launched RTR in 2010. Things really started, taking off 2012, 2013. And so, I'm on an island running the motorsport business and then running RTR, which was at another time, which was currently being run in Michigan at the time. And
Ford was running it, or you were running it?
I was running it with someone I was working with at that time. Basically, when I thought, conceptualized RTR, I was 30 years old, had no idea how to bring my vision to reality. And so I was able to work with somebody to make that reality happen. And they managed, production of parts, manufacturing, shipping, all that. And so, so basically I'm at kind of home base in Maryland, kind of, being the president of, Vaughn Gittin Jr. Motorsports, which is run out of Charlotte, RTR Vehicles, which is being run out of Michigan. And it worked for a while because I was so, I had no choice because I was so busy growing my driving career and focused on that with content and exhibitions and competition. It was a really, it was a lot.
So when you say you were running Vaughn Gittin Motorsports out of Charlotte, that's building the car.
No, oh, sorry. Yes. So the team was run out of there. So the rig was here, all the competition stuff happened there. I was still doing the demo stuff out of my garage, Abby, my wife, with respect to like logistics and things like that. My dad was my truck driver, and then I would just have some fly-in mechanical support. So I was still doing like a lot of the demo stuff in Maryland. Competition was run, managed and run inside of Charlotte. And then, RTR Vehicles was run in Michigan. And so I've kind of like command center from Maryland, managing all this, working with all of our sponsors, doing all the deals, showing up and driving at events. And it got to be a lot. And I did that until we moved.
So what was the driver for you to move it to Charlotte as opposed to, say, Michigan?
Yeah. So step back. I ended up moving RTR vehicles down to Charlotte. So Ian, who was our engineer and the brain behind a lot of our race cars at the time, he's a very good businessman as well. And so I basically had him. He was the CEO of the enterprise, if you will. And so I had him running the motorsport program, helping me grow RTR vehicles, and while I'm still, doing everything that I'm doing. Moving everything to Charlotte was because we had everything here and the infrastructure here, but also the talent pool here is fantastic.
So you do draft off of the NASCAR talent here.
Yeah, the motorsport in general. It's not just NASCAR; it is NASCAR heavy, but this is a hot spot for not just talent but parts. For anything that you need. This is
Sort of thing. It's like a Silicon Valley of racing here.
yeah, yeah. You can get anything here, right? I mean, there's this is. I mean, we're in Concord, and literally, like,
I find it interesting. I started calling it Concord
Concord.
because I'm from New York, and
Yeah.
Concord, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, no, it's Concord.
I just say it how it feels. Concord sounds odd, like, oh, we were conquered.
Yeah.
But I've had this discussion a couple of times, and I could be wrong, but I say Concord.
Yeah. So you're like one of the few people that I know that was very passionate about Maryland. Like you grew up there. You are Mr. Krabs. You had like a rock quarry behind your house that you would literally tear apart with your multiple vehicles. Do you like living here?
Yeah, I love it.
So you've acclimated.
Yeah, oh yeah. It was like no acclimation. It's the same thing as Maryland. So I was just like, I would say people are a little more chill and it's a little like more laid back here. But like as far as like the weather and the terrain and like what it is and the vibe, it's very, very similar.
And how is the family acclimated? Because now, since you and I did this thing at the Peterson, you were only married 2 years at that point.
Yep.
There was no gunner.
No.
There was no, like, you have a baby at this point.
Yeah. So things have progressed on the family
You
side.
don't need me anymore. Like, you're all grown up.
Yeah, no. Abby is doing amazing. She's had quite a few like evolutions in her being since you've seen her last. She did a stint, doing MMA. She's done a lot of like spiritual work. She's a yoga teacher. She's a Reiki master. And just a lot of things that she's done to fulfill herself. And I think once she kind of got some of those things she really did, it was time, we were both ready to have a child. So we had Gunner in 2018 and we just had Grayson. It's cool. It's been a huge change that has shifted some of my priorities and focus. And I'm pretty proud to say that I'm like finding a really good balance right now.
So when you say shifted your priorities, like one of the things I've always respected about you, yeah, you could drive a car. There's no doubt about that. But I'd say one of your secrets in your success was you literally, you hammer on people. You brought presentations to events and said, you're going to sponsor me. And they did. And I think that's one of the things that sets you apart. So what has changed in your priorities now that you're growing up, you got 2 kids, you got a dog, you drive an electric car. I'm almost disappointed.
Yeah. Well, I drive multiple cars. I am shocked how much I'm enjoying driving electric vehicles.
Yeah.
So, for me, back to, so priorities. So I've been doing 30, 40 events a year for, I can't even tell you how long, probably since we met. And it got to be a lot. And so I realized, like I understand this business, right? Talking about the motorsport business, leaving RTR aside right now. I understand this business. I've created some great partners and I really enjoy this type of marketing and the challenges that come with it and doing things differently and creating value for partners of products who I believe in. And once we had Gunner, I knew that I was going to be by default like absentee father a bit, but I wanted to make sure like start focusing as much time as I could And I wanted to enjoy that part of life that everyone tells you, man, enjoy this now because pretty soon, my kid's in high school. And so once we had Gunner, I knew like, okay, first year and a half, like I can still crank, but I need to figure out the plan for after that of what I can do to get some work-life balance back. Wow, that sounds crazy.
World.
I feel like I'm 20.
Weird.
I feel like I'm 20, man. It's crazy.
It's funny how that happens. You get older, but for me, I stick on this age of 28. I always think of myself as 28. I don't know why. I don't get off that.
Yeah, that's good. Well, it's not
Because
quite 30 yet.
Ours, is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's just a number. I think my perspective and who I am is not really shifted. I'm just more experienced. Save the boring. When I basically got to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm willing to be gone this much. And so I've set a certain amount of weekends or events that I'm willing to do a year. And it's between 15 and 20. And I've been I think we should step back a bit because in 2016, I fell in love with King of the Hammers and Ultra 4. So once I fell in love with that, now I have my entire drift schedule and I have a new off-road schedule. And now I've got RTR vehicles business. And so I was just piling it on. And so when we had Gunner now at 2018, I was like, okay, I need to really figure out a plan so that, when he's, 3, 4, 5 years old, I can be home a little bit more. And so that's when I developed out the plan of how I was going to do that, how I was going to maintain the business that we had built on motorsport, leveraging, the things that I do, leveraging another driver and bringing some drivers into our processes to create the value, needed to continue playing in this world that I love, and drifting and youth automotive culture as a whole. So I was like, this is perfect. I'll step back. These two guys go run FD. I don't need to chase any more championships in FD. I grabbed my second in 2020. I'm fulfilled on that front. Nothing to prove to myself anymore in that sport. And shifted my focus a bit to off-road. Still doing exhibitions and content and marketing projects, but putting my competitive energy into off-road with the Broncos.
What led you to off-road? What got you to say, I want to start doing King of the Hammers?
Well, I started in motocross. I'm no stranger to the dirt. And I was literally sitting on a beach in Jamaica with my wife on vacation.
You go every, fall or something like that?
Yeah. Yep. This was 2015 and December 2015. And I go over winter. And fall 2015, Harry from Nitto calls me and he's like, hey, are you interested in doing the King of the Hammers? And I'm like, is that race with like the desert and the rocks and like the jumps and like the gnarliness? And he's like, yep. I'm like, that looks like a lot of fun. Like I'm in. So I show up to the lake bed. I have no idea. I show up on Boone Road. And for those of you that don't know what Boone Road is, this really rough road out to lake bed. I show up in a rental car and I pull up on the lake bed and it's just like Mad Max meets Burning Man on the lake bed. And I'm like, this is so cool. So anyway, I get into this spec truck and Lauren Healy, who's now my partner in Fun Haver Off-Road, hops in the passenger seat and he's like, hey, what's up? I'm Lauren, Nitto driver. And basically the me in this sport of drifting, like what I am to drifting, he was to Ultra 4, multi-time champ, the guy to beat. And so anyway, he went to show me the ropes and I love telling this story because I'm in this truck, we drive it over to this waterfall and it's this. And I'm looking up and he's like, go up that. And I'm like, whatever. Like, I get it. Like a joke. Where's the cameras, And he's like, no, put it in 4 low and drive up that. And I'm like, well, how do you put it in 4 low? And long story short, I drove up that, did a little bit more training. And that year I finished King of the Hammers in the top 10.
You didn't build that truck.
Did not build that truck. This was a spec truck that was available. And basically I was the first crossover driver to ever finish a race, yet alone in the top 10 in my class. And I was like, man, this is so cool. And at the time, I had heard, grumblings that Broncos coming back. And I just kind of, my business mind and my passion kind of came together. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to make an investment. I'm going to build a truck and I want to do this. I was like, no one's doing things the way that we do them, like looking at how we do marketing and work with our partners and drift. It's like, nobody's doing this. This is like a clean slate for me to come in, do what I do, and, rapidly excel in it. From a driving skill perspective, like it was so perfect to transition from drifting into this because you're on loose terrain. It's all about grip. It's all about vehicle placement. It's all about just perfect weight management. And I just had a knack for it. My motocross skills, my drifting skills, and everything that I've done really made me get up to speed quickly. Not to mention I had some.
Not forget your experience driving your Toyota Tercel. Probably had something.
Yeah, do you remember that? I had a hatchback Tercel in high school, and I used to take friends, and we would go on the road, off the road. I would just launch it and destroy that thing. Anyway, so and to mention, I also had great mentors. Lauren Healy, the guys at Jimmy's 4x4, like a lot of people in that sport really gave me a lot of shortcuts. So, starting in 2017, I debuted a classic Bronco bodied race truck. People were laughing at me like, yeah, this guy's never gonna, it was really interesting, the perspective that people had based on, them seeing other people come into their sport and not make it. And so that was a really interesting fire for me. I don't usually pay attention to what people think, but this was one of those things that people were like just questioning. And I felt like I had to like, not just for me, but for my sport, for drifting. I guess a lot of the competitors, they've seen a lot of top names.
Drift competitors?
No, off-road.
Oh, so they basically thought you were an interloper.
Yeah, they thought they'd seen a lot of people cross over into their sport and never do anything, crash out. There's a lot of stories of like top names in off-road trying to get an Ultra 4 and just couldn't do it. And so they just kind of discounted me. And we brought an independent front suspension truck into the 4500 class, which is like the pro class below the top class. And I couldn't afford the top class. And I wanted to learn in a lower class and work my way up.
Now, hold on a minute. When you say you couldn't afford it, is it just you footing the bill for this whole thing, or have you brought Ford and?
Yeah. So, well, at the time, I had one main partner that was supporting me in off-road. I mean, I had some support from some of my drift partners, but it was a new venture and I wasn't really comfortable like going and asking. I'm one of those guys that like, I won't ask if I know I can't deliver.
So for the avoidance of doubt, you're not going to Ford and getting stuff from them. You're actually building the car on your own with your budget.
Yeah. Well, what I did is I worked with New Bright, and we built a RC Bronco, and that helped fund the build of the truck and get it off the ground, basically.
So you're basically Elon Musk selling flamethrowers.
Kind of. So I figured out a way to make it work without like, because I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to go. I knew that like we could support the marketing of an RC vehicle. I knew the royalties on an RC vehicle would be good, and it was really good timing for New Bright because they wanted to do these types of things. I still work with them. That vehicle is on the shelf today still in Walmart for 5 years.
All in your store here, you have a 1/18 scale car now.
Yeah.
And the Hot Wheels car as well. So too.
We've got crazy amount of merchandise now. So anyway, so that's kind of Ultra 4. So like I fell in love with it. I started dominating in the 4500 class. I got kicked out of that class. They effectively voted me out.
That happened.
We brought an IFS truck in there. People made a stink, even though it wasn't against the rules. People made a stink. So Dave Cole at King of the Hammers, they did a vote. They effectively voted me out. And Dave was like, look, basically I could have stayed in that class, but he's like, look, come to 44, So I went to the unlimited class, and what's that?
Harder?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, these guys have been doing it for 25, 30 years. I went into that class, and my first year learned a lot. I've learned a lot every year in that sport to where now, like, I fully get it. Like I'm still learning little things, but um, I partnered up with Lauren Healy. Um, and the first year with Lauren was just kind of like an arm's length. He ran my truck, brought it there, and I paid them. And then the year after that, he and I partnered up and started Fun Have Off Road together. And now we are, I think, two of the most formidable competitors out there.
Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit because you've kind of shed some light on how the business is operating behind the scenes, at least a switch to a new line of business. How have the sponsorships evolved now? Because when we first talked, you just started by moving a big sponsorship away from here's a salary to I want a sponsorship.
Mm.
Like, what's the relationship with, I'll make it up, Nitto and Ford now? How have they evolved?
Yeah. So, so now we have like a multifaceted 360-degree motorsports marketing program, right? So I think it's important to get into that, and I can explain to you a little more. So the business is as followed, right? So RTR Vehicles, put that aside. We have motorsport marketing, right? Our marketing group. So I have the competition divisions, which we run 2 Formula Drift cars and Formula D. We have the Fun Have Off Road, which runs 2 4400 class unlimited class trucks and 1 stock class Bronco in Ultra 4. Then we have exhibition, so which is like the enthusiast events that we go to. So we've got 3 Mustangs for that.
Grid Life kind of stuff.
Yeah, Grid Life, Hyperfest, all Mustang Week, like the events that I can be on the ground with my people having fun. And then on the off-road side, we've got a fleet of Broncos and special projects that we do the same. We go to enthusiast events. We're, doing our hobby, the things that we love. And Lauren Healy, my partner, he's been doing this 25 years and just an amazing partner and amazing personality and that side of the game.
And to be clear, he's partner on the Fun Haver
Off-road. Correct. Yep.
You're lock, stock, and barrel on RTR and the marketing.
Correct. And so I straddle. Right, I do on-road stuff, I do off-road stuff. Lauren is focused fully on off-road. And so I don't have any conflicting partners. All of my partnerships are extremely long-term. I've been with Ford since 2010. I've been with Nitto since 2012. I've been with Monster since 2010. Pennzoil is, 15, 16 is when we started working with them. But a lot of our, partnerships now are just a part of this massive marketing program. And so those relationships, many of them have grown because as our business has grown, so has their needs, and their needs in both of these spaces have grown. And, not only do we compete, but we have a full-blown media agency division. So we're effectively, a micro agency that is experts in these spaces that we play. And we know how, aside from like me endorsing and supporting the partners that I want to work with and these products I believe in, we also create marketing projects for them.
So that brings up a good point. So before you got here, what you guys don't know is he was out schooling around with some demonstration while I was here setting up. When I got to the run of your place, I saw everything.
Yeah.
You got 2 editors up there that are like chained to a desk working on all your videos. Do you come up with a video? Like you do these, every once in a while you drop these crazy videos, you just playing with a car. Do you come up with this concept and then go to Ford and say, hey, I want to do this? Or is it 100% put out by Vaughn Gittin Motorsports?
Yeah, so it all depends, right? Some projects, a partner will come up and like Nitto say, hey, we got a new tire and we really like to do something cool. This tire's, built for this and da 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 da. And my team and I will conceptualize a project and pitch it to them. And then we'll go turnkey produce it or bolt on some of our production partners on it, depending upon the scale of the project. Some of the more so those are called those, commercials, if you will. But there is, some of the more wild projects you guys have seen, like me drifting the Nürburgring. Like that was a dream of mine that I just made reality.
That was all. I also am personally, my favorite one is this thing you did when you and I got together at Oshkosh. By far my favorite project of yours.
Okay.
That car was badass, and you got a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah, the Eagle Squadron Mustang. So we basically built a Mustang that was a tribute to the RAF Eagle Squadron, so the Royal Air Force. And the Eagle Squadron was a group of Americans that went over during the war to help the British. And so we did a tribute to the Eagle Squadron and basically built a Mustang RTR Spec 5 with a really dope, livery on it. That was a tribute to the Eagle Squadron vehicle.
Leather on the inside.
We did like really badass like leather. I had a guy we got some parts from an actual old RAF fighter, and we somehow we got metal from it, and I had an engraver engrave the badge on it and inlaid it into the interior places and stuff. But anyway, we auctioned it off for charity, and I guess $420,000, I think it was.
Yeah, it was almost $500,000.
Yeah.
It was, and it goes to basically a fund to sponsor young pilots to
Yeah.
get kids into flying.
Yep, the Young Eagles, I think it's
The thing that just, this is why I don't like you anymore. You got to drift this thing was a real Mustang.
Yeah.
P-51 Mustang.
Yeah.
In England.
Yeah, in England.
Yeah, like,
And I took it like across like some of the epic iconic roads and stuff in England. Yeah, it was pretty epic. Yeah, we took it to Goodwood. I drove up to Goodwood Hill. Had like a bomber jacket with like the full flight gear, like old school flight helmet on. It was a lot of fun.
All of us here at MotoMan are super excited to not only have the podcast back, but for it to be its own show. And there we look to you for a little assistance. Can you help us grow the show? Two really easy ways to do that. First and foremost, if you're reaching out via YouTube or other streaming platforms, you click on subscribe, notifications, or more importantly, share these episodes with your friends, especially on Reddit. Now, if you're downloading these episodes, listening via podcast platforms, we'd ask you to rate us. The good stars are wonderful, but leaving a written review would be even better, especially sharing who was your favorite guest. So with that, I am incredibly grateful for your assistance in help growing this. And now, back to the episode.
So video stuff, that just kind of comes like for me, like look, I'm a professional fun haver, and part of that is sharing fun and inspiring people. And content is a great way to reach people and inspire them and have fun and do cool things with my friends. Because most of the people that I work with are friends. And so I've been able to build this business around my passion, which is all of my team's passion for the most part. And we get to, travel the world doing badass stuff with cars and trucks now.
P-51 Mustangs.
Yeah.
But okay, so that I would have known you now, 2009, and I would not say what you just said is bullshit. Is it 100% true? You are a professional fun haver because that's what you do. But the business specifically, like you were the first one to get into drift and say it's not going to be a Datsun or a Nissan. It's not going to be something Japanese. Instead, you were the first one to say, I'm going to do this with a Mustang. So how is the relationship now that you're 10 years on, 12 years on with Ford? How has that evolved?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important for everyone to know, and I started off with a Nissan. I was not a Mustang guy.
Yeah.
And then when Ford debuted the 05 Mustang, literally that's my first Mustang right there. I mean, that's the one.
Well, when I walked in, I was like, it's like being reunited.
Yeah. And so in 05, we bought that Mustang for $5,000 over sticker. And I had never driven a Mustang. We wanted that because Ford had debuted remember the GTR concept? It was like an orange. I was like, oh, it's so sick. It's the first Mustang that really engaged me. And once I drove that car for the first time, I was like, what have I been missing? Like, I've been missing torque and like just this experience of driving this car. It's like, it's sick. Why did I discount it? And, later on, after some self-reflection, I realized I was just being a teenager, just rebelling against like what my dad thought was cool and stuff like that. And so anyway, once I started competing, once the team and I decided that it was time to bring some American muscle into drifting, I started pounding on Ford's door and really didn't get the door cracked open for 2 years. And in 2007, started a small relationship with Ford. 2010, got my first contract with them. And
Now, I got to interject for a minute because not everybody saw the first Inside the MotoMan studio. He was the IT guy that would go and knock on your door and say, I'm here to fix your computer. Like, that was this guy. And on the weekends, he would take his personal Datsun,
Nissan. Yeah.
and you would go to like Englishtown, New Jersey with tires in the back seat, and you would drift and go back and be fixing computers.
Yeah, I would actually leave work on Wednesday, stop at my house. 'Cause I lived in Maryland, worked in Virginia, stop at my house on the way to New Jersey, load up with tires, drive up Wednesday night, drift, drive home Wednesday night, and go to work Thursday morning.
So go back and watch that episode, but I just want to make sure if you haven't seen it, know the trajectory we're talking about.
Yeah. We've just got a fantastic relationship with Ford. I work with, Ford's a very big company, so I have my, motorsport relationship is with Ford Performance. And I do a lot of work with the brand teams, specifically the Bronco, F-150, and Mustang teams. And, I think they look at us as somebody that understands these tough to reach markets, because I am that. It's my market, it's my generation, and a lot of, the people that work here on the team, their generation, or a younger group, if you will. And I know I'm getting old, but we still have our finger on the pulse of what's cool. And I think that, I've grown a reputation inside of Ford as someone that's passionate and wants Ford to win. I've been there since 2007, 2008, when it was $1,
It's like when you and I first met, you were just Mustang. And then after our Inside the MotoMan studios, when you started doing that pickup truck, you did the
Ultimate Fun Haver.
Yeah, that was badass. But now they've obviously Ford, as you know, I'm not a huge Ford guy.
Yeah.
But I have respect for them as a business because they've been very focused and they've gotten into individual silos of business and are wildly successful in each individual silo. Was it something that you came up with and said, hey, Bronco team, I want to work with you? Or did the Bronco team organically say, we got to work with this guy, Vaughn?
Well, I was racing a Bronco on Ultra 4.
So it was an act, but did they come to you or do you go to them?
Well, there's a little bit of both. I mean, everyone, the one thing that's been challenging, I'm known as the drift guy in the Mustang, but I also partnered up with, one of the biggest names in off-road, Lauren Healy. So when they were starting to think about what to do with new Bronco, I was very vocal and told them we wanted in and we're the guys. Like, who else are you going to put against us? It was just kind of like,
was it a harder pitch when you went to them with the Fun Haver?
To build that F-150? No.
15 you did that?
That was 2014. And that's what kind of launched my mindset as a professional Fun Haver. That vehicle was a result of a reevaluation of where I was going with my career. And that was my first kind of like straddle of on-road, off-road. Hey, I'm I'm here to have fun. I like to jump. I like to drift. I like to cruise the twisties too. And so the Ultimate Fun Haver was kind of like my first foray outside of drift, but like I still kind of brought my core with me because I had a handbrake and it drifted amazingly. So once, the success of that, it was also a great case study to say, hey, when I do things outside of a Mustang, it's still, people are still interested. It's still fun, and I think it's more, for me, I always felt, or I thought that it was more about just the vibe, not necessarily about what I was doing. I felt that I could make anything fun and people just need and want fun. And so that's what I made my brand. My personal brand is, as a professional Fun Haver, is fun. And then obviously we launched the company, which we haven't mentioned, Fun Haver, which is, a brand around that mindset of just finding the fun.
Let's switch gears now to I guess the best way to describe it is tuner business. I mean, you sell parts, you upfit whole cars. What does that business look like now?
Yeah, it's all crazy. I really appreciate this combo because it's fun. I don't sit back and think about it enough. I just head down, ass up too much.
Because I started my show in 2009 and you introduced me to a sport I didn't understand. I was an ignoramus back then when it came to drift, but now I have appreciation for it. But I look back at you now and I see the trajectory to see it go from a guy that, frankly, you were just working out of your house at that point.
Yeah.
And now I'm sitting in your race shop in NASCAR country. That's an amazing story.
Yeah.
Forget about what you and I talked. That's just an amazing trajectory.
Yeah. I pity myself every day I come here.
Well, you were working with Bo and you were selling parts at Galvin Autosports back then.
Yeah.
You and I were first talking.
Yeah.
And now it's whole cars. So what does that look like now?
Yeah. So RTR vehicles expanded, right? I mean, we debuted RTR at SEMA in 2010, just to give a little timeline. We put our first production vehicle out in 2011. And by production vehicle, these are parts that we've developed to package around the Mustang. And these parts, at the time, the business model was to just basically send the dealer a package and they install it. So it's all dealer installed stuff. And we only had Mustang, maybe 8 parts. Now I don't even know how many parts we have, but we have complete packages for Ranger, F-150, Bronco, Mustang, multiple generations of those vehicles, and then all the aftermarket parts and a massive wheel line. We're still focused and committed on, Ford vehicles only. I look at RTR as kind of like I think AMG is the only thing that I can compare it to where, we do things a very unique way. We do things very OEM plus, fit, finish, everything.
Mustang still the majority of the business?
Yeah. Mustang and Bronco's catching up pretty quick.
And is it, if I get something through a dealer, if I go to Bo and I get something through a dealer, is that warranted through Ford?
Warranties to us. So we have a couple projects, right? We have one vehicle that's through Ford, and then we have other vehicles that we work directly with dealers on.
And now there is a special build thing you do here?
Yeah, so now that we've moved in here, we have a couple builders across the country. So the way that you can get RTRs, you can go to a Ford dealer and you can buy some of our standard spec vehicles. Turnkey vehicle, you go in there, buy it, finance, all that stuff. Or you can go to one of our certified installation or built by RTR partners, and you can either take them your car and they'll upfit it to RTR spec, or we can basically turnkey you a vehicle. You tell us what you want, we'll get a brand new vehicle through one of our dealer partners. We'll build it here, and you can come pick it up either here at the RTR lab or one of our built by RTR partners. And, in addition to that, obviously we do a couple one-off wild builds every now and then for, marketing purposes or just to show our engineering prowess, or, one of our partners like Ford Performance and the Mustang Mach-E 1400. Yeah, or Ken Block, his Unicorn. So we do take on some high-profile builds here and there, but our business is extremely busy with selling our parts and packages.
Can someone come to you and that's not Ken, and you build them a unicorn type size project, or it's just you got to be a Ken to do that?
It's not that you necessarily have to be a Ken. It's got to just make sense. Like there's got to be a bigger picture for it. Like my business is not to make money off of building one-off cars for people.
Like give us an example. RTRX.
Yeah,
one of your most stunning cars out there.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, what is it?
69
Mustang that you've made into an amazing car. How much does that cost to really build?
I would have to guess to build that car right now. It'd probably be neighborhood of like $500,000-$600,000.
Yeah, I was gonna say like $758 today.
Yeah.
Well, Ralph G, Ralph Gio?
No.
Chief designer of Stellantis, Chrysler, Fiat, and he's been a car guy all his life. He just built this carbon fiber 68 Charger. Speed Core built it for him.
Okay.
It's the closest thing to what you did to that. Granted, the materials are a little bit more exotic.
Yeah.
I'd say that was an $800,000 build.
Yeah.
Well, but it's the same kind of. You look at it, looks like a '69 Mustang, but it's not.
Yeah. 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 So no, that's not our business. We do always have usually almost have a special project being built.
But that's marketing, is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
Extend the brand.
Yeah. It would be either for me because I have an idea and I got to get my creativity out and we have the capacity and my team's excited about it, so we'll just do it.
Yeah.
Or Ford, or I have a crazy idea, and I know, I think that Ford is aligned in showing some certain technologies and things like that. So I'd partner with them to help me make this crazy idea a reality. And then other times it's someone like Ford who's like, hey, we really need a prototype, and we'd like RTR's flair. We like the ease of working with you guys, and so we'll work on some collaborative projects like that.
So then the obvious progression. What's next?
Well, I feel like we're just really getting a lot of traction. I mentioned earlier, but I've got 60 employees now, and
Congratulations.
thank you.
I really have to say congratulations. That is quite, like, I don't want to get too flowery here, but that's the American dream, man.
It really is. It's the interesting thing, I reflect on this often, is that we haven't had to look for people. It's been like a straight up out of a book, the law of attraction, that the right people have literally found us, or we found each other. And I've just got such a good team of people that just are so passionate and just want to do cool shit. I mean, that's our literally our mission, behind closed doors RTRs, cool shit wins. And we're not a massive corporate company. We're still very entrepreneurial and still pretty nimble. And
it's 100% you. You own the company. There are no partners.
yeah, so Fun Haver Off Road. I own Fun Haver wholly, but Fun Haver Off Road, Lauren is my partner. But he and I are just so lockstep in everything. I probably don't even need to ask him, and he would find out a year later. But yeah, of course I would have loved to do that. But
Yeah.
but yeah. So what's next? I mean, for me, I have my vision right now, and my priorities are to. I think drifting is still very important. I will make my way back to Formula Drift at some point
As a competitor.
as a competitor. I'm really enjoying off-road. I'm going to continue being in that space. I love the outdoors. I love conquering terrain with Broncos and friends. And it's just like my best friend's my co-driver in racing. And so we go out with pre-run. It's just a blast. And the cool thing is, this is it's very family friendly. Going to a racetrack and being at a racetrack for 3 days for my wife and a 3-year-old is not ideal. But going to Ultra 4, where they're in a Bronco and she can go hit the trails with the kids while I'm doing the things I got to do, it's a lot of fun for them. So I'm definitely going to be continuing that space as my, athlete career, if you will.
You see things like bringing on more drivers? Do you see things like, I'm going to start doing more of the Ford lineup, not just Broncos and Mustangs, but Mach-E's or whatever EVs they come out with?
Yeah, I mean, I'm certain. Look, I think I love Ford, and
I couldn't tell.
I'm a very Farley and I started at Ford around the same time. When he was just in marketing, and so I really believe in what we've got going on. I believe in him. I think that there's the right direction and vision for all the Icon, the Icon vehicles, right? The F-150, or sorry, the Bronco, Raptor, Mustang, all the nameplates out of the passion vehicles. I think that it's awesome that we have a strategy to be making emotional vehicles and not just toaster ovens. And so anything that we can at RTR can add its flair to and put smiles on faces, we'll get involved with. My compass is not generated by money. My compass is generated by fun.
You said that exact same line 8 years ago. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I'm not, but that's what I live from.
One of the big differences between now and 8 years ago, I would argue Ford was a bit lost at that point. I mean, put aside that I'm not a Ford guy, I look at businesses for a business perspective as well. And Ford, they were the first ones to say, we're not doing cars anymore. And a lot of people scratched their heads and said, that's stupid to abandon cars. But they didn't just abandon cars because people were buying crossovers. They clearly had a plan of, we're going to go deep into pickups, but not just big pickups. And we're going to go deep into very small segments, get into niche segments. And that seems to have paid off significantly from others. Are you now participating like earlier on in the development process because of that?
Yes. Yeah, like we are now, RTR is now a strategic partner with Ford.
What does
Uh,
that mean?
so we've been chosen by the Icon Group to be a strategic partner, meaning we get brought in for early discussions, get perspectives. We also get data and things very early so that we're able to start working on vehicles to have support for them when they come out.
Another example of a strategic partner at Ford.
ARB would be a strategic partner at Ford. They're one of the strategic partners, and I really don't know whom else. I know there's a few, but I don't have them all right at the top of my head right now. But they've chosen some companies that they feel do things different and have different looks and styles and have delivered over the years. And so, so yes, we're privy to a lot of things that are going on and direction. I wouldn't say as early as would be good in some instances, but they have their processes and they're still very, tight-lipped on a lot of things until it's time, need to know basin.
Turning it around, what would you see as, and this is more of a general question, what would you see as Ford's biggest challenge at this point? Or maybe 3 challenges.
Yeah, I think that's a big question.
Big question. Yep. You're a big man.
Yeah, I think one of them is, we have an opportunity right now to make vehicles so much more than any of us could ever imagine. Um, I think that the cars as we know it, I think there's always going to be a passion point for vehicles, and that, we need to keep vehicles very connected to what we expect of them. We can personalize them. They're a extension of our body and our personality. And so I think as new technologies come in, I think it's going to be challenging. I think it's a challenge to figure out how to leverage those new technologies, get people excited about them, and also keep people comfortable of the vehicles that they've grown to love.
Are you saying Ford is more challenged in that area than other companies?
No, I think it's just a challenge. I think you asked me Ford's challenge, and I'm looking at it as like my mindset of like, Ford, we're going to be the first to be there. I think this is automotive. I think there's a challenge in the automotive world.
Would be a challenge Ford specifically is facing
as a whole. So I would say the biggest challenge that Ford is facing right now is the transition into becoming what we are committed to becoming, which is
what?
Which is a very forward-thinking, electrification-focused company. So you got to think. I mean, I don't even know how many employees Ford has. I don't know how many dealers Ford has. 4,000, 5,000, something like that. But these groups, right? So you have Model E, right? And then you have Ford Division that's been doing or is now internal combustion engines, right?
Yeah.
So how do you transition all these great people into this? You have the experts at putting motors together. You have the experts at, putting transmissions together. You have the experts at calibrating internal combustion engines, right? How do you transition people seamlessly to be in this other?
Does Ford have a specific challenge in that area?
My perspective is yes.
They do.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more challenging for them than, say, a Toyota.
Well, Toyota's not really getting an electric, but
we can debate that. Or how do you define electric? I think that's
right.
the question.
Right. Not full EV, right?
Yeah.
So, I'll be honest, I don't really pay too much attention to what other auto manufacturers are doing. I do some benchmark like experiences just so I know what the other vehicles are out there, but
For you or as part of your relationship with Ford?
No, for me.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's important. Like, I love cars.
Yeah.
And I am aware that I'm so ingrained in the Ford world that I do need to peek my head out every now and then. But I also find that I have a lot of creative people around me. There's a lot of creative people around at Ford as well. And I get the inspiration that I need from following my compass of fun
I understand.
and what I love in cars. And so, um, I think any challenge that I give you, I think can be relevant to any auto manufacturer because, when you look at what auto manufacturers have been doing forever, they're all at some level, the process is the same. So I think, knowing Ford and how they've worked and, they've always been one of the best at manufacturing and process driven production and, figuring out how to continue to scale, whether it's, with an F-150 or it's with a Focus or with a Mustang Mach-E or, a Bronco. And so now I think the biggest challenge is like, how do they do that with battery electric vehicles? We're committed to battery electric vehicles, right? The numbers are all over the place. We've got battery plants and electrification plants popping up here and there. And I think that's going to be tough to overcome,
How much, bringing us back to the world of Vaughn, how much time do you think elapses until that thing is electric that you're drifting? Competitively. I don't mean like in a Mach-E that you've made for a dog and pony show.
Yeah. I think
Or does it happen at all and drift continues to be internal combustion?
well, I think competitive drifting electric would by far be dominant in that sport.
How far in the future do you think that's going to happen?
That's a trick question. 2 to 5 years.
Okay. We're going to hold you to that.
Yeah.
So we're going to check back in.
Yeah.
Now, you and I have to close this up the same way we closed up the one we did 8 years ago.
I don't even remember how we did.
Give you the same question.
Okay.
What are the 3 aspects, attributes, events in your life, people, whatever, that led to the success of Vaughn Gittin Jr.?
No, I think the first one I would say is my parents. Like I wasn't I grew up with my mom, my dad was in the picture, we weren't together or they weren't together. And we weren't we weren't well off at all. We had no heat in our car.
Dad had enough money to pay you $25 for every A that you got.
Do you remember that? That's true. Yeah, I remember buying a remote control car for that, with that. But yeah, so my parents, I think a lot of, they made me work for things. Like my mom gave me a $35 budget for shoes. And like what high schooler wanted to go to school with $35, kangaroos or whatever it was. And so, I had to work to get the shoes I wanted. I had to work for everything that I wanted. And that instilled a work ethic and a confidence. Through that mindset, I had to go talk to people. I had to go knock on doors. I delivered newspapers. I hired friends to cut grass with me, back in the day. And so a lot of that instilled experiences that created my business prowess and who I am, right? So parents. I would say I've had a lot of people believe in me. I think that the way I went about things, I earned the trust, but that doesn't mean that people need to support you. And so I've had some great partners that have given me a chance. Even when I came into off-road, they could have been like, no, we're going to go get this guy that's been doing it forever, but they trust me. So I think that's kind of twofold. I'll take a little bit of credit on that because I've earned the respect and the trust from working with them and putting my money where my mouth is, if you will. But I think my partners have been a huge, huge part of my success.
That's 2. Now third one.
I have to say my team.
Okay.
Yeah. There is, it's cliche. There's no I in team, but like none of this is possible without them. From even, starting out when I was just a driver, I was just the one piece that showed up to jump in that car. There was a whole team behind it that made it happen. So I think everybody that has ever supported me from a team perspective, or working inside of the business, have enabled all this to happen. Because there's just, I wouldn't be, it wouldn't even be a 3% of where we're at right now just by my parents.
People that trusted you. And
people gave me a chance.
People gave you a chance.
Yep.
And put
Partners.
trust in you.
Yep.
And the team.
Yep.
Sir, can't thank you enough for your time. This was very special for me because
Thanks.
I've literally had a front row seat watching you grow into the man you are today. So
Yeah, thank you.
congratulations.
I appreciate it, and thanks to all your viewers, everyone that watches. It's really fun for me to step back. I don't think about this stuff enough, and it's only these types of intimate interviews and your good questions that get me to reflect on how far we've really come. And this, what started as a dream for me is now, helping others live their dreams and their passion. And for me, like, that's the biggest win.
And that is the entire purpose of this series, is to show literally examples of people that focused, did the work, made it happen, and have become folks like you.
Yeah.
So until we see you guys in the next episode, bis später.